Do you know how much your vehicle costs to own? I mean, literally the total dollar amount, including all expenses. If you don't know this number, then you simply don't know its impact on your business profitability or even your family budget. Well, the only way to know that answer is by doing the math, which almost nobody does. And so, I'm going to share a total cost of ownership analysis I did for someone who's thinking about getting a new Tesla to use as a rideshare car service vehicle in New York City. Like most people, he hadn't taken the time to do the math, and the results surprised him. In fact, a simple 3-year lease in New York City would cost him over $64,000. Take an over 36-month lease, that's just about $1,800 a month, but his lease payment was only $632 a month. Now, of course, he understands there's fuel and maintenance and insurance, but he had no sense that the difference was that big. A total cost of ownership analysis, sometimes called TCO, is a full accounting of all costs related to your vehicle. It is the only way you can factually know answers to questions like if you should lease or you should buy, or is that EV really cheaper than a gas car, or which of those trucks you're looking at actually cost your business less, or perhaps you shouldn't even buy a vehicle, you should take car service or hire trucking service. Unfortunately, for most people, the math isn't easy, and they purchase vehicles with feelings, not facts. And so this video shows how we do the math for our clients. We are doing this with a software tool called Motriq, which makes all of this easy, but we can talk more about that later. To avoid making this video too dry, we did simplify a few things, but we'll cover the greater detail towards the end of the video. Okay, let's get started by looking at this new 2026 Tesla Model Y. This model is actually a long-range all-wheel drive, and keep in mind the specific model or trim level of any vehicle can make a significant difference in price. Also, in fuel economy, and yes, electricity is a fuel, which also means that range can matter, and range affects where you charge and how you charge, which can affect the cost of your charging. So the vehicle will be operated in New York City. And location is another commonly ignored factor in vehicle analysis. It affects prices of everything, from the vehicle itself to sales tax, insurance, and fuel, and can affect your incentives also. The shopper is interested in driving 12,000 miles a year, which is another important point. Not only does it affect depreciation of this expensive asset, which means the lease payment, but also the more you drive, the more your total cost in dollars because of increased fuel and maintenance. But typically what happens is the cost per mile can actually be less. And if this is a business where you want to use the vehicle more than less, this may matter to you. The shopper wants to take a 3-year lease because there are some attractive incentives at this moment. And also, this is his first EV, and he wants to eliminate any uncertainty around resale value and the future repair costs of things like batteries, which can happen after the warranty expires. And finally, this owner will be charging in public. He lives in Manhattan and will be in a parking garage and will have to use public charging. So the owner's done a bit of shopping, and here's the story. The vehicle is $50,630 on the window sticker, made up of the base MSRP, the destination fee, and the order fee. There are some incentives going on in New York relative to this lease, and the two of them are a New York Drive Clean rebate. This is something that is available up to $2,000 for electric vehicles, but it gets reduced as the price of the vehicle goes up. And so because the MSRP is above $42,000, in this case, the Drive Clean rebate is $500. More significantly, Tesla is offering a lease credit of $6,500, which in a nutshell is the former $7,500 consumer tax rebate that got eliminated last September, but is still applicable to leasing companies under something called the Commercial Clean Vehicle Credit. And in a nutshell, Tesla is choosing to pass along $6,500 of that savings directly into the lease as a capitalized cost reduction. So this is what's making leasing this vehicle very attractive right now. So in a nutshell, the bottom line is the final price of this vehicle is $43,630. Let's look at the particular lease deal that Tesla is offering right now. So for a 3-year lease at 12,000 miles a year, that's 25 cents per mile excess. So anything over 36,000 miles at the end of the term, the owner will be charged 25 cents. The residual value is 56%. For those of you not familiar with leasing, this is a really important number. Basically, leasing is financing the difference between the final price of the vehicle, or what's known as the capitalized cost, and what the vehicle is worth at the end, which is the residual value. There is an acquisition fee, also known as a bank fee, for $695. Leasing uses the term money factor, which is basically your interest rate. Tesla is offering just under 1% right now, but note that that is for a good credit score of 720. And finally, when the vehicle is returned at the end, you'll owe $395 as a lease end termination fee. Now, of course, there are other costs. The big one is insurance. Insurance varies hugely by location and vehicle type. Also, what coverages you choose. Well, the driver in this case, who's a 40-year-old driver with good credit and a clean record, in New York City, the Tesla is $4,650 per year. Registration is relatively small, but we include that because we are doing a full accounting, $152 per year for the registration. And in this case, there are no dealer fees. Now we have a big one for this particular case. The owner will be parking in New York City, in Manhattan, and this is a very significant component of owning this vehicle. The monthly fee for parking at his location is $400 a month. In addition, many garages, particularly in New York City, will charge an EV surcharge. That means if you have an electric vehicle, simply add $100 a month to have it in the garage. Furthermore, there's generally a charger access fee. In this case, it's $50. And note, the charger access fee is not charging. It's just for the privilege of being available to the charger. So this owner will pay $550 a month to park his car and have access to a charger, or $6,600 a year. So we will add that value right back in here. Charging is separate. Now, charging at his location, and since it's public charging, is quite expensive. It's 48 cents a kilowatt hour. If you're not familiar with electric bills, you may want to look into that. It's not as obvious to people or as intuitive as gas prices. But as an example, if you lived just outside of the city and were able to charge on what's known as time of use, you would pay 8 to 10 cents a kilowatt hour overnight to charge your vehicle. If you're charging in a parking garage in Manhattan, you're paying about 5 times as much for fuel. Now that sounds crazy, and it is, but as we'll see as we get to the end of this evaluation, the costs of fuel, and even though he's paying 5 times more for charging than he would elsewhere, that's really not where the cost of this vehicle is. Of course, we have maintenance as well. This is a new vehicle in a 3-year lease, and we model it at a cost per mile for each of the 3 years. We can show the detail at the end of the video, but these costs here include everything that Tesla has for their scheduled maintenance, and you'll see it escalates quite significantly because things like tires in year 3 get very expensive on this vehicle. Last but not least is sales tax. Now, sales tax, unfortunately, is not simple. There are many hidden ways you can bleed money here, depending on which state you live in. For example, New York is one of the few states that requires you to pay the entire tax for the lease up front. Sure, you can roll them in, but the bank still has to pay the full tax amount of all 36 months on day one. They just loan you that money and then charge you interest. But New York State then taxes that interest. So it may be a mouthful, but you are paying tax on the financing of the tax. As we said, we're using a tool called Motriq, which is a software SaaS tool made to do these types of analyses. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining the software or the tool because the focus of this video is on getting to the total cost of ownership number and understanding a little bit more about that. But just enough for you to follow along. The tool allows us to build projects. So we're going to choose a project that we've pre-built and put data in here, so we didn't need to spend a lot of time doing that on this video. Let's just take a look and see what we have. What we have is the ability to compare multiple vehicles, which is out of the scope of this video, but we're going to do just the first column, which is vehicle number 1. So if you look here, we've selected the year, make, and model. and have pulled up the EPA fuel economy, which is miles per gallon equivalent for an electric vehicle. And these can be edited if these are different for your case, and we could discuss that. The average annual mileage driven is really important, as we explained earlier, and so is the percent of city driving. We've put in 70% city driving. It does make a difference because your fuel economy will be more or less. Also, your maintenance will be different. So we've said that this is a 3-year period of use. We're doing a 3-year lease, and we've built a maintenance model here, which we'll just show quickly. So what has been done here is we've entered the main items that Tesla says will be scheduled maintenance. You can add more, but these are realistic for an electric vehicle in the first 3 years. Tire rotation, wiper blades, cabin filter, and tire replacement. And so we've come up with these amounts of maintenance for the 3 years, which is 3 cents per mile in the first year, 5 cents per mile in the second year, and 18 cents per mile in year 3. Insurance is quite as expensive, as we spoke about, $4,650 for this vehicle, and we've put the very high parking rate, which does skew this calculation considerably, but it is a total cost of ownership. So if you don't like that, you could leave it out and kid yourself. For this vehicle, 48 cents per kilowatt hour, gas and diesel. These prices are irrelevant unless we put more vehicles here to compare. We said that the vehicle price was $50,630, but there was $7,000 worth of incentives, so we took that off. And so we have a vehicle price, and here's how we calculate the lease payment. There's a utility that takes the price and the taxes. We've put in all the terms of the lease, 3 years, the money factor, which is just under 1% interest, the residual value, which comes out to this number, the acquisition fee, which is the bank fee. We've included taxes in the lease payment. We have 12,000 miles a year and 25 cents over mileage. And we are not predicting to go over mileage, and a $395 return fee. And so what we have is a capitalized cost of $44,325 and a monthly payment of $632.29. These are all the inputs that we've provided. We can do more. There are many other features of the software to do that, but let's keep it basic. So with that, let's go over and look at results. So if we go to financial results, this is the total cost of ownership analysis. Let's just go right to the headline. At the top, a whopping $64,000 to own this car for 3 years, or rather lease this car for 3 years. That sure seems like an incredible amount of money. We're going to understand how it's that expensive in a few moments. So that's $1.79, just about $1.80 per mile driven. And that's the takeaway. That's a shockingly high value. Let's try to understand how we've gotten there. Basically, cost of ownership can be put in 2 major buckets: vehicle procurement and operating costs. The vehicle procurement costs here are $23,248. The vehicle operating costs are $41,513. Quite high. Let's understand why. We have, under vehicle procurement, we have depreciation. Depreciation and finance and tax and fees comprise the lease payments. We'll see how we got to those lease payments. We have a annual schedule in the back we'll show in a second. And for operating costs, $4,663 for fuel, $3,100 for maintenance, a whopping $13,950 for insurance, and then of course these recurring annual fees, which were parking, $19,800. So for a 3-year lease, these are the costs per mile and the components of the makeup. So we can see here, the single most expensive thing for keeping this Tesla is 55 cents a mile in parking, which are these recurring annual fees in the green. Almost as expensive is the depreciation of the vehicle, which makes up the majority of the lease payment in this case, because the interest rate is relatively small. And after that, insurance is the third biggest amount, almost 39 cents per mile for insurance. So the overwhelming costs of this vehicle in order are parking, number one, the depreciation, which means the lease payment, not including the interest or the tax, and then the insurance. Everything after that is relatively minor. Maintenance, fuel, and so forth. Let's look at actual numbers in a regular cash flow statement. So here we go. This is a cash flow statement with net present value, meaning the sum totals to today's value. The first column is the net present value, and the others are the expenses in year 1, 2, and 3. Starting at the top, we do see the depreciation. Depreciation is very interesting. It is usually the first or second most expensive thing. In a lease payment, it's fixed. You know your residual value. When you buy a vehicle by loan or cash, you don't know what the vehicle is going to be worth in the future. But you need to estimate what it would be worth at the end when you sell it, because you need to recover those funds. That's not the scope of this. This is a lease. We already know that the market value will be 56% of the original at the end. That's what we agreed to in the lease. So we know what we're financing. We're financing the difference between the purchase price today and the residual value in the future. But we're also financing the tax and all the other fees. So what does this mean? Let's look at the lease payments. We're paying $7,588 per year, which is the lease payment we calculated earlier, times 12. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. Procurement costs are our lease payment. If this was a purchase, we'd be selling the vehicle and recurring value at the end, or if we use it to end of life, we would be scrapping and getting some type of salvage value. But the lease payments are our main costs. Here's the big stuff. Let's look at operating costs at the bottom here. These are the big numbers. Fuel, $1,554 per year. Pretty small. It's the second smallest cost of operating. Maintenance is the smallest cost, as is often expected on an EV, providing you keep it a few enough number of years that you don't get exposed to battery replacement or other expensive repairs, perhaps repetitive tire consumption. Insurance, $4,650 a year, which, as you can see, is $13,950 over the life, right? This first column is this over the entire life. And then these other recurring fees, recall, we had to put parking someplace, and that is parking, which is swaying this entire costs. And this is the point of the total cost of ownership analysis. You could forget about things like parking or access to charging or other things. You need to put them all down so you see how everything rolls up. And so we have $23,158 for procurement costs, which are almost entirely the lease payments, plus a small $395 fee at the end. And then we have the operating costs, which are the significant part, which total up to $41,513. And so together, $64,671 to operate a Tesla Model Y in New York City for 3 years. By now you should realize that a TCO analysis can provide dramatically different results for the same vehicle in different situations. So in the case that we saw, the sticker price of the vehicle itself, which roughly translates to depreciation, contributed to less than 1/3 of the total cost. Instead, the ramifications of operating the vehicle in the city was the single biggest cost driver. In fact, we redid this analysis by just moving 30 miles out to the suburbs and resulted in over 40% reduction in the total cost by eliminating parking, reducing charging costs, and a significant reduction in insurance. Also, this has been a simplified analysis. There are many other things we commonly look at. A side-by-side comparison of multiple vehicles to see different brands, models, or applications will change costs. We also cover different vehicle types, such as school buses, delivery vans, Class 8 trucks, and all fuels, including gas, diesel, hybrids, propane, fuel cell, CNG, biofuels, and more. We also commonly compare different depreciation models, so we can see the impact of different brands that may hold a higher or lower resale value, or what the impact may be of having a poor vehicle condition at the end or higher mileage across the terms of use. Another very insightful exercise is a sensitivity analysis. This is where the cost of an item is varied over a range to find a break-even point. For example, this graph shows the price of diesel fuel varying and seeing at what point the per mile cost breaks even with a gasoline or electric truck. Emissions is also an important factor for many. If you're buying an electric vehicle to reduce your carbon footprint and haven't taken into account the impact of actually generating the electricity, then you're missing something significant. And what about non-greenhouse gas pollutants? Fuel evaporation, tire and brake particulates, it all matters. We calculate and account for that when comparing vehicles. So a little bit about Spectivate. We help make decisions based on facts, not feelings. And we do that with software and some consulting services. Our software tools and our people, if you need them also, evaluate product performance, finances, fuels, energy, and environmental impact, and let the facts fall where they may. We're independent, we're unbiased, and we're not motivated by what you buy, or even if you buy at all. So if you're considering an EV, diesel, propane, or something else, and if it's subsidized by grants or paid out of your own budget, the answer for you should be rooted in facts. Maybe you're a fleet, finance, or ESG leader, or perhaps someone looking to develop policy for a municipality and needs some help. If so, we'd be happy to speak with you.